My girlfriend got pregnant with another man and left me while I was deployed in another country. Years later, she came back asking me to help her get away from him. I had been deployed in Afghanistan, and when I came home and walked through the arrival gates, my girlfriend, Emily, wasn't there. I ordered a cab to my apartment, and when I walked in, I instantly heard her crying hard in the bathroom. She finally opened the door, and that was when I saw her standing there, holding a positive pregnancy test. Tears were running down her face, and in that moment, my heart dropped to a point I had never experienced before. It took me so long to formulate a sentence, and the whole time my girlfriend kept begging me to say something. The very first thing I asked her was, "How far along?" She responded, sounding guilty, "1 month." The words felt like a punch to the gut because, in that moment, all I could do was visualize myself 1 month ago. I was deep in Kabul, fighting for my life, seeing my brothers around me lose theirs, knowing I could be next. In those moments, the only thing that kept me going was Emily. I saw her face in the stars at night. I heard her voice telling me, "You can do this." I pictured her standing at my funeral, crying uncontrollably. I had to make it for her, and I did. And while all that was going on, she was in bed with another man without protection. I visualized that image, and as I did, I felt my blood boil. Rage, betrayal, and heartbreak crashed over me like a tidal wave. I asked her who the father was, and when she whispered a name I didn't recognize, I yelled at her. I didn't even know what was going on around me. All I could see was red. How could the same person who talked about spending our lives together be pregnant by another man? The thought of it infuriated me. I yelled at the top of my lungs, my voice booming throughout the apartment. She tried to explain herself, but I didn't want to hear it. I left her in the bathroom and slammed the door shut. The wood of the door cracked down the middle like lightning had struck it. Emily screamed in horror. I stormed into the living room and flipped the coffee table. The shatter of the glass on the hardwood floor was deafening. I punched a hole in the TV mounted above, and it fell to the floor. My hands were red from the wounds. I realized what was happening and tried to calm myself down. I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't want to hurt Emily, and I knew I never would, but I was in so much rage that I had no idea what I was capable of. And so I left. The next day, I came back to the wreck of an apartment, and Emily wasn't there. The only thing that was left was a note from her on top of what remained of the coffee table. She said she was leaving and feared for her life after the night before. I understood, but I knew that I would never put my hands on Emily. If this was what she wanted for us, I would respect her decision. I only wanted to see her happy. After all we had been through together, I never thought it would end like this. She was truly my everything and gave my life meaning. Emily was the only one there for me when my parents and brother passed away tragically in a car accident. I had lost all my family in one night, but Emily was there. She helped me pick up the broken pieces of my heart and sew them back together. She was there for me when I would wake up from nightmares about my past, and I thought we were only right for one another. I've always adored Emily ever since we were 18. We were fresh out of high school and planning on going to the same college. Everything was fine until her parents went through her phone and found out she was bi. They told her it was against their religion, and that they couldn't have a daughter in their house who had demons working in her. They decided to kick her out, and she had nowhere to go. We were young and broke, and we couldn't stay with my parents because the college we were going to was out of state. So, I sold everything I had to build up savings for us. We packed up her things and I got a job to provide for us. That is how I ended up in the military. Now all I had left of her was this note. Everything in our lives had been scattered away, all because she decided that getting into bed with some man was worth so much more than everything we had built together. She left behind everything we had for him. The realization made my heart ache. I walked into the bathroom and turned the knob on the broken door. The knob and half of the door broke off in my hand as I tried to pull it open. I sighed and looked in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, and bags hung underneath them. I left the apartment and went to the liquor store. Days turned into weeks, and I could feel myself losing control over my life. I spiraled into a dark abyss. The PTSD I'd fought so hard to control took over, and I drowned my sorrows in alcohol. Emily had been my lifeline, and now she was gone. She was the only stability I'd known. It was my best friend, Jack, who found me one night in a dingy bar. We had served together in the military and grown close. He didn't say a word when he saw the state I was in, the empty bottles, the mess. He simply hauled me to my feet and took me to his place. I resisted at first, but Jack stayed by my side. He didn't lecture me or anything like that. He just stayed there with me until I could sober up a bit. The withdrawal was brutal. My body jerked and trembled at night. I would often wake up in cold sweats. I craved the numbness I felt when I drank. I was tired of having to deal with my emotions. With Jack's help, I started to piece my life back together. It wasn't easy, and every day was a struggle. The cravings didn't disappear, and the pain didn't magically go away. I learned how to manage my PTSD better, but I found a glimmer of hope in the routine. Months passed, and I was starting to feel like myself again. One Saturday I went to the mall. As I approached the shoe store, I saw a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye. At first I almost didn't believe it, but there she was, Emily. She was standing outside a baby clothing store, holding the hand of a man who could only be the father of her child. The man she had chosen over me. It had been months since I'd seen her, and the shock of her appearance hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily looked awful. The vibrant woman I had loved was nowhere to be seen. Her hair, once so beautifully kept, hung limply around her face. Dark circles framed her hollow eyes. Her shoulders slumped, and her clothes seemed to hang off her. The man beside her, who I assumed was the father of her child, looked impatient. His grip on her hand was firm and possessive. He was tall with a stern expression, his gaze focused elsewhere, seemingly oblivious to Emily's apparent distress. As they moved through the crowd, he walked a step ahead, pulling her along rather than walking beside her. I stood there, stuck in that spot, my heart aching at the sight. Seeing her like this stirred something deep within me. She wasn't happy. She was suffering just as I had. The man glanced back at her, looking irritated, and I couldn't help but feel angry. Our eyes met briefly. For a moment, Emily seemed happy to see me. She quickly looked away, however, her hand tightening around the man's, but not before I saw the silent plea in her eyes. Her look spoke volumes. I watched them disappear into the crowd. As I made my way back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that our paths had crossed for a reason. I felt like this was another opportunity to help her, to show my love for her. It hurt me to see her like this, and I knew I could make it better. That night I went for a run. When I got back, I saw her name light up on my phone. She had texted me. My heart raced as I opened it. I was shocked but felt a tingle of joy that I hadn't misread her eyes at the mall earlier that day. She sent a long text expressing how sorry she was for cheating on me and how she wished she'd never had this guy's baby or married him. I told her that I forgave her, and she asked if we could meet up later that week. I agreed. A couple of days went by, and we met at a quiet cafe. As soon as she saw me, she burst into tears. She told me about how he treats her and how she thought she was doing the right thing by not forcing me to be the father of someone else's child, but she ended up trapped in a nightmare. She had been my world, and seeing her like this broke my heart all over again. I decided to take care of it, promising her she wouldn't have to suffer anymore. She asked if we could get back together, but I said no. The only reason I agreed to help her was to prove to her that I still loved her and that the loyalty we'd had over the years hadn't died. So I did some digging. I spent hours on social media piecing together fragments of information from Emily's posts and comments. The man, Derek, wasn't hard to find. He had a routine and habits that were easy to trace once you knew what to look for. Public check-ins at the gym, photos tagged at his favorite bar, and even a few work-related posts gave me a roadmap of his daily life. One evening, I parked my car a few blocks away from their house. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. I felt a familiar tension work its way into my muscles. It was the same feeling I'd had on missions. That heightened awareness and sharpened sense of focus. I watched their house from a distance, noting the comings and goings, the lights flicking on and off. Derek left the house around 8 p.m., heading to the gym as he did every Tuesday. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. The darkness hid me. He was a creature of habit, sticking to the same route and parking in the same spot. I observed him from my car, hidden in the shadows, as he walked into the gym. It was a 24-hour place, so people came and went at all hours. I waited, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours, until he finally came out. He was sweat-soaked and carrying a gym bag. He didn't notice me as he walked to his car. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I knew this was it. Just as I was preparing to act, another man approached Derek, seemingly recognizing him. They started talking. I knew I couldn't move now, it would be too risky. I waited in my car until they finished their conversation. Before I could approach him, Derek got into his car. His next stop was the bar. I followed him there, parking across the street and watching as he went inside. The neon lights flickered, casting a sickly glow on the pavement. I waited, knowing that alcohol would make him an easier target. Hours passed, and the bar began to empty. It was close to closing time when Derek finally stumbled out, his steps unsteady, his demeanor aggressive. I stepped out of my car, feeling my pulse in my throat. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I shadowed him as he made his way to his car, walking as quietly as possible. He didn't see me coming. I grabbed him from behind and dragged him into the alley behind the bar. He struggled, but I had the upper hand. I pressed him against the brick wall. I didn't hold back. I let out years of frustration on him, every ounce of pain and rage pouring into that moment. When it was over, I walked away, leaving him a bruised and bloodied mess. I knew he wouldn't be putting his hands on Emily ever again. Emily never contacted me again after that, and I didn't seek her out. I'd done what I could for her, and that was enough. I found a strange peace in knowing that the last thing I did for her was protect her, even if it wasn't the kind of protection I'd once dreamed of offering. Life went on. I focused on my recovery, leaning on Jack and the support system I'd built. The nightmares never completely went away, and the pain of losing Emily remained a constant ache. But I learned to live with it. I found new things to live for and new goals to strive toward. One day, as I was walking through the park, I saw a couple playing with their young child. They were laughing and seemed like the perfect family. I felt a pang of sadness but also a glimmer of hope. Maybe, someday, I'd find that kind of happiness again. For now, I was content with the knowledge that I'd survived. I'd been to hell and back, but I was still standing, and that was enough.